Hi, this is Dan Sullivan. I'd like to welcome you to the Multiplier Mindset Podcast. We're talking a lot about game changer, being a game changer as an entrepreneur. And I want to give you a personal example of the greatest game changer of my life. And that's when I formed a collaboration with Babs Smith. I jokingly tell all of my 10 times workshops, I should have t-shirts that say, no Babs, no coach. If I hadn't met Babs, if I hadn't collaborated and gotten into a teamwork where I could combine my unique abilities with Babs' unique abilities, nothing of what you see in Strategic Coach would have ever happened. I sometimes say I'd still be a one-on-one coach, and I'd be an old one-on-one coach getting tired of what I'm doing. But instead, 35 years ago, I had the great good fortune of actually encountering Babs Smith, and I knew almost immediately, and so did Babs, that this was a collaboration for life. There's a funny story, and I mentioned it in the movie that we made, that one of the spouses of one of our clients in the early days, we were having a social function and we were having dinner, and this woman who is from Tennessee or Mississippi, and she says, "And what do you do in the company, Babs? Do you help out with the company?" Babs, with a great deal of grace, simply said, "Honey, I am the company." And no truer statement was ever said, because if you look at Strategic Coach, you can think of Strategic Coach as a theater. And there's everything that it takes to have a theater. So the entire structure of the company, all the processes in the company that allow us to coach 2,500 entrepreneurs in 8 different cities in 3 different countries. And we have a team of well over 100 who each have their unique ability. The whole thing is held together by unique ability teamwork. All of that is the theater of Strategic Coach. And then there's what's on stage, and I'm in charge of what's on stage. Since 1989, every single quarter since 1989, I've created a brand new workshop at the level I was operating with every single quarter. So well over 100 quarters, I've created a brand new workshop. I could not do that if I didn't have the entire structure of the theater around me. And that's what Babs has provided in her work with all of the team members of Strategic Coach. So the game changer for me started right at the beginning, back in the 1980s when I met Babs. I remember the first thing I ever talked to her about regarding my thinking, my strategic thinking, was the strategy circle. She had her own business at that time, and one afternoon I spent 3 hours taking her through the strategy circle related to how she wanted to grow her business. And when we got finished, she said, Dan, this strategy circle and everything that you're thinking about is going to be really, really big. And at that time, I had a feeling that she knew more than I did how big it was going to be. And it was simply because of the collaboration that I've had with Babs since 1982, which has allowed us to create this marvelous company. So I've been living within a game changer, and I've been living within an amazing collaboration since I met her on August 13th, 1982. So when I look back at the great success that Babs and I have had right from the beginning, I'd like to offer this as an insight that probably the future that just involves you, if you look at your own skills, is a limited future. And the reason is because it's going to require that you more or less continue doing exactly what you're doing now. And you're not going to have much greater impact in the future if it's just about you than it has been in the past. But what I realized, that if I could just collaborate with someone who had vastly greater skills, certainly from putting teams together and actually creating process and structures together, I would just be a one-on-one coach, the same as I was in the 1980s. But I've gone way, way beyond that, I've been able to zero in on certain unique abilities that I had at the beginning, but I didn't have a scope. I didn't have a possibility for them multiplying. But what has happened since the very beginning when I teamed up with Babs, and then Babs and I have teamed up with many other people using the same collaboration model where other people with greater skills came into the framework of a strategic coach. That's been the lesson for me. And I think it's not just a lesson for me. It's not just a lesson for Babs. It's a lesson for every single entrepreneur who comes into the strategic coach program. If it's just about you, you're going to come to an end. You're going to be bored. You're going to want to retire. But if it's constantly about collaborating with new people who have new skills, and you have a big dream for all those skills, then it becomes exponential. And it gets more exciting after each year. So at 73, I'm incredibly more excited about my future than I was back in 1982. And what's going to happen over the next 25 years is incredibly more powerful than what's happened over the last 30 years in growing our strategic coach. Here's a question for you, and this is a brand new thought for me, so this is the first time I've said it on video. And that is, take your last year's performance in terms of the results that you achieved and multiply by 1,000 times, not 10 times, multiply by 1,000 times, and ask yourself, if it were just dependent upon your skills, could you go 1,000 times? And most people would say, I can't even think about just my skills going 10 times. And I said, well, there may still be some temptation on your part to think if you worked harder and longer, you could go twice. You can't go 10 times, but think about 1,000 times. If you're local, think about 1,000 times taking you national. And you don't have to commit yourself to this. I just want you to go through the thinking process. And the thinking process is, what other capabilities would I need that would do two things? One is they would simplify my life so that I could just focus on what I love doing and what I'm really good at doing. But what they would bring is all the other capabilities that would allow the value that I have created after all my entrepreneurial experience and the unique approaches, the unique ideas, the unique processes I have would take it 1,000 times, and you'll come up with a list of other capabilities. So the only trick that you really require for endless growth in your entrepreneurial career is that you stop seeing the achievement of all the growth ahead of you in terms of your own skills. See it entirely of a collaboration between the skills that are yours with a growing network of other skills, and then you'll understand what it means to have an exponential future. Otherwise, it's just your individual future. And my feeling, you didn't become an entrepreneur to stop at some point. You became an entrepreneur to always be growing. To get a really good, very compelling inside look at how Babs and I have grown Strategic Coach, go to dansullivanmovie.com.